I want you to imagine me as a teenager. Now, I know that sounds a little bit weird, but I just want you to kind of imagine me as a teenager. Maybe imagine yourself as a teenager would be a lot easier, maybe I say, because when you think about our memories of ourselves when we were teens, it's actually a little bit foggy. And I say this because I'm thinking of my own son, my youngest son in particular, who's 16 right now. And he and I have been working a little bit on some of the assignments that he has to do as he's coming to the end of his school year. And as he was doing those assignments, I noticed that some of his assignments he was absolutely excited about. I mean, just curious about it and engaged. And then some of them he was not excited about them at all. And so I thought to myself, I wonder what I was like when I was 16. And I had to kind of like really dig deep into my memories to try and remember what I was like, because I thought, is it the same? Was it the same? And so let me just kind of show you a little bit of what I thought my memory was like. Now, I'm going to disappear for a second, and I know this sounds really weird because we just began, and you're thinking, are you going to watch a blank camera screen right now? Is he going to return? I promise you I will return. I know we just began, and I'm going to disappear, but I'll be back. Right, I'm back. See, and you were worried that I was gone forever. Well, I'm back. Now here's the thing. What I need you to do is just go with me on this. When I was 16 years old, well, actually all the way through from 12 through to 16, we had a school uniform. And we had school uniforms all our life, but we had school uniforms that involved blazers, jackets. And at around that time in particular, Miami Vice was huge. Now, we didn't wear our ties like this exactly. We actually used to take this part of the tie, the school tie, and we tuck this part in. We'd have this part really tied up all the way top, so our tie would actually look like this. And then, because it was a required thing, obviously, the tie, with the jacket, that's where Miami Vice kind of like hit us, and we had all the inspiration. And I'd turn up my collar like this. I'd go to school with my collar like this because Don Johnson was very cool. And I'd take the sleeve, and I'd turn the sleeve like this, and take my shirt and turn it inside out. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to school like Don Johnson in Miami Vice. Of course, that was what it was like for me to be a teenager when I was about 16 years old going to school, compared to my son, who's now 16, going to his school. And I do remember that when I went to school, I remember this teacher, this English teacher that I had for several years, and she would come in and she would say, "Now, Oliveira." She would stand behind me. She was like 5'0", right? Elderly lady, very prim, very proper. She would just stand behind me, and she would just fix my collar as I was sitting down. She'd fix my collar. She would roll down my sleeve, and she would say, "There, Oliveira. That's much better, isn't it?" And I would say, "Yes, miss. Much better, much better." And she did. She loved that. She loved just to correct us, get our form right, make sure that we actually look the way that we're supposed to do. She also wanted us, when I was 16, to be absolutely excited about all that she taught us. And I remember that I remember this particular poem a few years earlier where she brought this to our attention. It was Samuel T. Coleridge, and he wrote this poem called "The Rime of the Ancient Mariner." You probably studied it yourself. I remember this vividly because I was not absolutely excited about that. I was kind of like my son about that particular subject that he's not excited about, where I was thinking, Don Johnson, Miami Vice, that sounds great, but the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, that's not high on my priority. In fact, this is not a simple poem. No. This is not like one verse. This is not like a single line. This is not like a few verses. It's 625 lines. And she wanted us to be excited about this poem. What is this poem about? Well, it's about a sailor and the sea and an albatross. I mean, seriously, you got a sailor, you got a boat, you got the sea, and an albatross. And I mean, how exciting can that be for 625 lines? What I didn't understand straight away, that she kept on prodding me all the time and pushing me all the time, is that she wanted me, and she felt this very strongly, she wanted me to understand the depth of what it is to take a risky decision, as it had happened in this particular poem when the sailor, made that risky decision where he just recklessly just shot the albatross out and then realized the consequences of his actions in his life. And as a teenager, what she wanted me to understand is that there are implications and there are causes and things that take place in your life that are of value and of weight. And she felt this to her core, that this was something that we should remember, that there is always something deeper in the story, in the text, that's worthwhile spending some time inside and understanding. I, of course, was just interested in Miami Vice, and it took me quite a while to kind of delve into that space, to grow into that space and understand everything about it. But there was wisdom in everything that she was teaching. And there was wisdom in that because she was trying to bring me to a place where I would actually say one day, wow, maybe there's wisdom in everything that we do, in the decisions that we make, and they have consequences and implications for our lives. Now, let me take this jacket off and return to this current story that we're in. If you don't mind, I'm going to take this tie off as well, because it's a rather unique tie, beautiful tie, but not tied entirely properly, right? I'm sure you would concur as well. There are, of course, lots of great stories. And all the stories of life, if you spend time and ask yourself what these stories are about, probably all of them have some kind of deeper meaning behind them. They're layered. I particularly love all the narratives inside the Bible. And I want to share with you in particular one narrative that's found in the Gospel of John, John chapter 4. And it's really easy to remember because it's John 4:4 is the particular line in that whole story that really stands out for me. And this is what it actually says there. And he had to pass through Samaria. Complex line, right? And he had to pass through Samaria. Now, when I read that, I know what it means. So it's pretty powerful. In fact, the first time I really studied this particular sentence in depth and understood the story in depth, it actually made me weep. No, I'm serious. You're thinking, are we reading the same thing? Are we understanding the same thing? It's true. And he had to pass through Samaria. Has so much power, so much strength behind it because there is intention. There's deep intention behind this particular line inside here. John, who wrote this particular story, was actually the last writer. He's the last writer telling the stories. And you have to think about his particular situation. If you were the last writer, the last disciple, what would you write? What stories would you tell of Jesus to the world? What would you say? Man, I need the humanity. I need people to remember this, so they may be strong and they may live good values for their future. I need them to know this about Jesus. And if they knew this about Jesus, they would have a different way of thinking. Well, John wrote this particular story because it was a powerful encounter of where Jesus went out of his way on a journey, stepped out of his way, went into a town, and stopped outside of the town and went to a well, met this woman, explained to this woman through a fascinating story, back and forth a conversation, that she belongs, that she is transformative, and that she is a leader. And it was a really curious conversation. It was deep, multi-layered. She would retort back, and he would see where she was going, and he would say to her, this is not where we're going. I'm trying to take you over here. She would try to distract, and he would bring her back to the space and saying, I need to talk to you about your life. I'm telling you, there's something absolutely important to share with you. And by the end of this particular conversation, she was transformed. I mean, she really was. She went back to that town. She took over that town. She took over Samaria, and she became a leader of renowned change. She transformed that city because of that one conversation. Now, here's the thing. In English, when we read this particular sentence, and he had to pass through Samaria, we don't understand part of the depth of it. But in the Greek, there's a little word. It's only used a couple of times in the whole Bible. And it basically says this, and he a day to pass through Samaria. That's the Greek word. It's not a difficult Greek word. It just is a day. You can even say it yourself, a day. You want to try that? Nobody can hear you say it, right? You're by yourself probably, or with your friends watching this, so you can just try it yourself. A day. It's a pretty fantastic word, right? And he a day to pass through Samaria. What does it mean? It means that he not only had to go through Samaria, but he absolutely had to go through Samaria because he wasn't satisfied. Jesus wasn't satisfied with the dysfunction in her life or that city. He wasn't satisfied with the culture in that city. He needed to transform it and change it. He absolutely had to make a difference. There are all sorts of things that we are called absolutely to do, and sometimes we forget how important they are. Years ago, before I moved from England to America, I remember I was working in England at the head office of our church at the time, and I had just finished a few years earlier working at this one particular church, and I'd built a relationship with a local fellow who was used to take care of my car, changing the tires. Now, I used to change tires on the front of my car a lot. And the reason was not because I drove quickly or because I drove a lot, and not because I drove around the roundabouts or the corners a little bit too fast, but I just drove a lot. 50,000, 60,000 miles a lot every year, all over London and Southeast England. And so I would go there often to change a new set of front tires, like every couple of months. And so I grew in a relationship with a particular fellow who was actually always there. And I will call this person Bob. As you know me, every story that I have, the illustration, I will always use the term Bob because it's just a good friend that I met many, many years ago. And so Bob will be the character always. So Bob, let's call Bob. And so I met Bob, and Bob's taking care of my tires. Well, I'm now leaving England, immigrating from England, moving to America, and I need to sell my car. So I'm inside my house and I've advertised my car, and I get a doorbell that rings and somebody wants to buy the car. So I step outside to sell this car to this person. And as I do this, what you have to know about where I lived, there was opposite my house a pub, just like literally across the street. So I'm standing outside my house and I'm convincing this particular patron why this Honda Accord that I drive, is fantastic and worthwhile for this person to buy. It's only a couple of years old, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. When all of a sudden, I spot Bob coming out of the pub. Bob is, how should we say, Bob is drunk. Bob is smashed out of his head. Bob is like wasted. Absolutely. Just like, I'm surprised he can make it across the street. So Bob makes it all the way across the street, and he walks over to me, and he joins in the conversation as I'm trying to convince this person to buy this car. And he starts to tell the person, "Oh, mate, you should definitely buy the car." And I'm like, "Bob, I don't need your help. I'm doing fine here. Person's going to choose by themselves. I don't need your assistance, but thank you for the kind words." And he starts to say to the person, "Oh, yeah, you should trust the governor. Just buy the car. The car's reliable. I know the person. He's a good guy." And I'm like, so eventually the person who's interested in the car thinks this is a scam and walks away from the sale. And I'm like, "Oh, this is not helping me. This is a disaster." And Bob looks at me and says, "Well, that's a loss." I'm like, "Yeah, no kidding, that's a loss. I need to sell this car. I'm moving to United States within the next month, and I need to get rid of this car now." So Bob then suggests that he should come in. And I look at him and I said, well, hang on a second. I'm in the middle of dinner with some friends from Australia who are visiting right now, and we're having dinner, and our house is very small, and so no, that would not be a convenient time, Bob. Why don't you go home and sleep off your pub experience right now? Bob's like, no, I got to come in. And he literally just walks into my house, and I don't have the mental power to stop him. So he goes into my house, and I remember this vividly because my house is very small, right? So he walks into the house, walks in through the living room, goes to the dining table. I have my wife and my son, and my son's, actually both my boys were there, and my friends from Australia, and he literally just walks around and he starts to kiss everybody in the head. He's like, "Oh, hello," and he kisses them on the head, and he goes around and he kisses every single person on the head. He's like, "Oh, lovely, lovely, lovely." I'm like, what is going on on here? And then I'm like, this is very embarrassing. My Australian friends, if you ever meet them, they're really funny, and I know that they've this story, this moment is captured in their memories, and they've used this themselves for many, many moments as well. But anyway, Bob finishes kissing everybody, and then he comes back into the living room. I'm just standing there in shock, and he sits down. I'm like, okay, you got anything to drink? I'm like, yeah, I can get you some coffee or some tea or something, and we can sit down. And so we just need to talk. So I sit down and we talk. Now here's the thing. Before I'd taken this other job, I actually had this other job at this church that I used to run a thing called Cafe Blue. It was basically a 5-course meal, and we would have a little bit of comedy, and then I'd do like a little talk. I'd offer a 5-course meal. People would pay for this 5-course meal. And I remember once I had invited Bob to come along to this event, and he brought his girlfriend along, and they'd enjoyed the night. So I just want you to understand that context, because then you'll understand what happened next. Bob starts to, in the state that he's in, starts to explain what's going on in his life, that he and his girlfriend with their daughter are just struggling a lot. She's got some problems, he's got some problems, the girl's got some problems, and he says it's rough, it's really rough, and he could do with some help. And then he brings up Cafe Blue, just like out of the blue, right? And he says, oh, I love that Cafe Blue. It was just lovely. And I said, yeah, it was great. It's still going. The new team's leading it, and they're doing a great job, and they've got a different vision for it and doing really well with it. And he said, yeah. And then he said, so how come you never invited me back? And I didn't know what to say. All my friends heard it, my Australian friends heard it, my wife heard it, and it was straight up, right there. As I said, the house was small, we were pretty close together. And I didn't know what to say. I looked at him and I said, I should have invited you back. And I could have made all sorts of excuses about job transitions and change of life, but I should have invited him back. And he said, I needed it. And he just looked at me, and I felt horrible, absolutely horrible, absolutely horrible. But I made a vow. I said it to Bob, said it to God, that I wouldn't miss any more moments. If they're in my power, I'm not going to miss any more moments. If I'm on my way, like Jesus, on a particular route, I'm absolutely going to take a detour. I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to let them talk into my life. If I'm going to read something, I'm going to see there's something that I could learn that's actually a deeper level, something that's new, instructive to me, I'm going to let it speak on another level to me, because I absolutely want to learn something new. I want to be curious, and I want to be curious at a much deeper level. And I want to encourage you today, as you think about today and the week ahead, as you think about everything that's going on in life right now, just to think about what are you called absolutely to do. And when you settle that, go for it. Go for it. Settle it. Be that. That's what I would encourage you to do. God bless you. God be with you. Have a great day and a great week ahead.